So at Montreat, it was my second time ever there. The first time I didn't go to the conference because I was too young. I was there because my parents were chaperoning. But even then, when I didn't go to the conference, it was incredible. But at the conference, it's almost surreal. You just feel so, surrounded by God and literally surrounded by people that you don't know, that you've never met before. And you're all, you all have slightly different beliefs and slightly different cultures, slightly different ideas that you can share. While I was there, I made a ton of amazing friends. I'm still in contact with a lot of them, so I returned to definitely my favorite place at Montreat, which is the prayer porch. It's a little hut tucked behind a bunch of buildings next to the creek where people will write down prayers on slips of paper and stick them into the wooden walls. And then you can go back through and read people's prayers and pray for them. And it just feels so, holy to me to be able to do that. Also, while I was there was a guy named Cal. He did energizers at the beginning of each keynote, and he was a character. He would jump a solid 3 feet in the air whenever he could. He would scream his head off about free popcorn, and you could hear it all the way around the campus. The theme I chose to talk about was the theme of the first day, which was seeing in the dark. And the whole idea of seeing in the dark is counterintuitive. The whole idea of the dark is that you can't see in it. It's unknown. And I feel like it makes sense that it was early in the week because there were a lot of people that were new to Montreat, had never even heard of it before a couple weeks before. And there was a lot still unknown to them. They were still in the dark. But that day discussed the issues with the metaphor of God being light and not darkness. Because at the beginning of everything, God was in the darkness. He created the darkness just as much as he created the light. The keynote talked about a restaurant in France called Dans le Noir. Pretty sure it translates to in the dark. And how the two keynoters, the couple, went into the restaurant. They had a reservation. They told the person at the desk their name, and a waiter came up to them and brought them into the restaurant. And they passed through a thick black curtain into complete darkness. And they said the food was amazing, but they didn't know what any of it was because they couldn't see it. And their waiter, at one point, one of the keynoters dropped their napkin. They couldn't even hear it. And the waiter walked over to them, picked it up, and said, "Excuse me, you dropped your napkin." And similar things kept happening. And they were trying to figure out how was this guy able to see in the dark. And at the end of their keynote, they revealed he couldn't. He was blind. He had been blind since he was born. And he was just so in touch with this restaurant. He had been working there for 40 years. He knew all of the ins and outs. He could basically see in the dark, in his darkness. I just thought that was a really cool story to tell. Thank you all for supporting us as we went to Montreat. I just loved it so much, and I hope that I will be able to go back next year.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Georgia Mostrom, and I'm a graduated senior, so I'll be going to the University of South Carolina in a little less than a month. This was my last year at Montreat, so my goal was to take any opportunity I could to do the things that made Montreat so special to me. So I played pickup basketball with my friends, which we've done every year since I got there pretty much. I climbed Lookout Mountain with our youth group. I didn't do it in the morning. They went one morning at like 4. I couldn't wake up that early. And then I ate ice cream at the Huck with a lot of the new friends that I made. It was like a cafe of sorts, and if you ever go there, get the salted caramel one. It's really good. However, alongside all of these adventures, the conference gave us a lot of food for thought, which filled any free time that I had with deep contemplation. The theme that I chose to talk about was Tuesday's Work in the Dark, and the day began with the keynote speakers, Brad and Julianne, pointing out a common misconception about this week's metaphor. They said that while God is light, that leads people to believe that darkness is the absence of God. I hadn't thought about that, but it definitely got me thinking. The darkness often referred to throughout the week was hardships, fears, or losses that we have or are going through. Yet the implication that dark times lack God is almost ironic. Of course the darkness would want one to think that, as it often degrades, dims, and most significantly, isolates us. Leaving in little less than a month for college 8 hours away certainly makes me feel alone. And as I'm the oldest sibling, I'm leaving behind my entire family. This has weighed heavy on my mind throughout the past year, and the fears of whether I'll be able to function apart from my family circled right back around when it came to talking about darkness. However, Julian and Brad then explained that the misconception that God is absent in darkness is just that, a misconception. God is a constant, forever presence, whether we like it or not. While God doesn't cause darkness, he is in it, his love a comforting reminder that we can do it. We will survive any hardship that comes our way. But I just wanted to say thank you to you all, because without the support of the church and the support of my parents, I wouldn't be able to have had such a beautiful, full circle experience this year at Montreat. And I'll certainly be taking the memories and the lessons with me to college, which is just a blessing. So thank you again, and bless you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah, and I was one of the adult leaders who went to Montreat this past week. One of the themes that really stood out to me was Wednesday's theme. Wednesday's theme was "You Are Here." This theme focused on ideas such as being your full self and not hiding parts of yourself to please others. One thing in particular that stood out to me was that a lot of people that are in the Bible who are called to God are unusual, or just unusual people in the Bible. For example, John the Baptist was a very unusual person who wore animal hair for clothing and ate locusts and honey, but the book of Mark deemed him as very important and included him in detail. Another example is David. He did a lot of bad things, such as sending his best friend to be killed so that he could marry his friend's wife, but he's remembered as a great king and also a direct descendant of, or a direct ancestor of Jesus. There are countless other examples in the Bible of people who are imperfect or unusual, but still matter and make a difference in the Bible. I think it's important to know that We all have imperfections. We're all unusual in some way, and yet we're all important anyway. Another idea that stood out to me on Wednesday was that even when situations seem hopeless, God will help you and lead you to the right direction. One example that we explored on Wednesday was Ruth. If you're unfamiliar with her story, I'll explain it. Ruth, as well as her husband and in-laws, were refugees living in another area during a famine. During this time, her entire family, except for herself, her mother-in-law, and her sister-in-law, died due to unknown causes. Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, told Ruth and her sister-in-law that they should go back to their original family so that they could take care of her. However, Ruth decided to stay with Naomi. At this point in the story, she had no idea what was going to happen to her or if anything was going to work out. However, she was able to trust in God and Naomi anyway. Eventually, she's able to get a new husband, which we don't know if that would have happened if she had left. To me, it seems like, for me personally, it seems like every time that I trust in God, things generally seem to work out as well. I think both of these tie back to the "You Are Here" theme really neatly. Firstly, we are all with God in both the light and the darkness, even though we're imperfect. One of the things that was said during the sermon that night was Jesus didn't come to serve imperfect people, which really stood out to me. This reminded me of the fact that we don't have to live up to certain standards that are put in place either due to ourselves or someone else. Additionally, we are here because of God. And since we are here because of God, we need to accept that God has certain plans for us. And we also need to be able to accept people for who they fully are and not who we want them to be or expect them to be. Thank you.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me, or maybe haven't seen me since I was in diapers and couldn't speak, my name is Chance, and my family actually used to attend Darnestown Presbyterian, and I was baptized here. Not long after I was born, we moved to Virginia and joined a different church. But this year I had the opportunity to attend Montreat with Darnestown Presbyterian, which I was ecstatic for. Darnestown welcomed me back with open arms, and it meant so much to me. This summer was my fourth and sadly final time at the Montreat Youth Conference. This fall, I'll be attending East Carolina University to study elementary education. And one theme that really stuck out to me was the Thursday theme, which was called Working in the Light. The sermon leader, she talked about how we can't stay on the mountain forever and how we're meant to take what we've learned back into our everyday lives. That sermon really stuck out to me because this was really the last time I was coming down the literal mountain and the metaphorical mountain. Another thing we learned about was the different worship personalities. There was 10 different ones, and the one I connected to most was the socialite worshiper, which means I connect with God most through other people, through conversation, shared experience, and community. And this week, I saw that in a big way. I saw God in Georgia's kindness and how she made everyone feel welcome. I saw God in Audrey's curiosity and her deep questions. In Carl's musicality, I saw someone using his gifts to bring joy to others. In Daniel's joy, I saw the kind of happiness that makes everyone around you smile. In Blake's infectious laughter and jokes, I saw how God uses humor to bring people together. And Sarah's friendliness helped everyone feel seen and included. And Dale's leadership helped keep us grounded all week with care and calmness. All of them helped light my path this year. But I'm leaving the mountain with the light I found there. I want to carry that with me, the things that I've learned, the memories I've made, and the people who showed me God in real, simple ways. Montreat has helped shape my faith. It's where I've asked big questions, made lifelong friends, and felt God in music, in nature, in silence, and in laughter. I'll carry those moments with me forever. The bonds we made, the songs we sang, and the beauty of the mountains. Even though this chapter of my life is ending, I know God's life doesn't stay on the mountain. I'll take it with me, and I'll keep looking for it in everyone I meet. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here for supporting us, and Pastor Blake and Dale for allowing me to come with you all this year, and allowing me to have a great year at one of my favorite places.
This year was my 4th year at Montreat, and so I have just one left. And I realized going into this year that every year going into Montreat, I end up preparing myself for sort of a normal year at Montreat. That's what I think I know how it's going to be. I bring the same things. I expect the same schedule. And I mean, in many ways it is the same, but in important ways, it's never a normal year at Montreat. And this year, for a few reasons, was, I think, one of the most unique and one of my favorites. So a big thing that we were aware of going into this year, that we heard a lot about over the previous months, is that the Montreat campus was fairly devastated by Hurricane Helene over earlier this year, and we were concerned about what we would see going in. And surprisingly, the campus as a whole was actually pretty unchanged. The parts of the roads that had been washed out were repaired. Various things were fixed up, but you could see the impact that it had had at the community, on the community. In the Montreat Heritage Center, we watched a film that they had put together there from the recordings of various people of when the flooding was happening. And it was stunning to see the amount of debris that had been washed into Lake Susan, the way the water was spraying out of the front of the dam. It was pretty disturbing to see. And it struck me how hard the community had worked and how much the light shined through them to help repair both Montreat and the town of Black Mountain after the hurricane. And so I think that connects a lot to the final day's sermon, which is the final day's sermon and the final day's keynote, which are the ones that struck me the most that I decided to talk about. So the final day, it did, of course, connect to the theme, but it was in many ways more of a charge, kind of a day-long benediction and charge than its own themed day. And it essentially tied in every previous idea into, now, what are you supposed to do? And that the theme of that day was seeing in the light. And so I think when I heard Monday's keynote and sermon, it's not that I didn't like them, but I found them very straightforward in a way. It was like the idea that we all carry God's light within us, the idea that God's light is everywhere is definitely a good word, but it's one that we hear often. But then as the week went along, I really enjoyed how that was expanded upon and tied in with other ideas, and how it honestly challenged a lot of the messages offered by the church as a whole, or offered by sort of mainstream Christian outlets, which is the ideas that it's not that there is no darkness, it's not that God isn't in the darkness, it's not even that the darkness isn't of God. It's that God is always working through us to make things brighter. And we reflect, we don't, we do shine with our own light, but we reflect God's light from us into the world. And so on Friday, we were challenged in a way, which is, how can you use your personality, use your tools available to you to reflect God's light out into the world and to show it to others? And so there were a number of possibilities offered there, but I think the ones that connected to me the most, and this is also connected to what Chance said about the spiritual personalities, It was the ideas that each one of us has a different sort of set of methods, set of skills that we see God through and that we reflect God through. And so I think I connected a lot with the idea of being a Christian activist, the idea of reflecting God through protest, through advocacy, the idea of being a creative, reflecting God through creative work, through media, and also the idea of being a naturalist and seeing God in nature and in the environment. And so I think that again connects back to Hurricane Helene for me. It struck me at the end of the week how hard the people of Montreat had worked to reflect God's light through their restoration efforts. And I think that was a very inspirational example to us at the conference for what we could do coming down from the mountain and returning to our usual lives. And so that's why I found this year especially impactful. Thank you.